Hi, my name's Vanessa Tomlinson and I'm from the Queensland Conservatorium Research Centre. I have with me today Karin Schaupp, Head of Guitar, and one of the fabulous artists researchers we have here at the Research Centre. This particular podcast is going to be about a project called the Immersive Guitar. And to let you know what that actually is, I'm going to pass it straight over to Karin to explain that.
Hi. So the Immersive Guitar is a project that's kind of been bubbling away in my mind, probably actually for a couple of decades, out of the desire to experience what it would be like to be inside a guitar, to be immersed in a guitar, basically. Now, to be able to do that and to be able to share that experience, obviously we have to make the guitar very big. So our first running title for this project was actually the big guitar. We've refined that since into the immersive guitar, which is probably a more accurate description. So basically the concept is about a very small audience, a very intimate audience, being able to experience being inside a guitar and that guitar being played. And the audience really feeling what the sound is like, being able to see the sound being made, and being able to kind of feel like a part of the sound making.
Karin, I remember really early in the process you were describing what it feels like to actually hold a guitar and play it against your body. Do you want to describe that sensation?
Yeah, I mean, so as you know, we hold the guitar, we pretty much hug the guitar to play it. And the guitar is basically a big resonating chamber. So the whole guitar resonates. So as you're playing the guitar, you really feel the vibration of the wood. And that's for me, a very intimate and very beautiful and special part of playing the guitar. You really feel the music on a physical level in a very kind of, I suppose, primal way. So I guess that's what we're mostly trying to recreate. And the idea had been bubbling away, but it really wasn't able to come to fruition until I found the right people to work with to make it come to fruition, and also, of course, the support of the research centre. So the people turned out to be, well, first of all, you, Vanessa, because you've done just some amazing work in the space of, I don't even know how to describe it, but, well, very much actually about space and about how sound works in space. And I think that's been such a big part of your output. And it was one particular work that I saw realised of yours, and I just thought, wow, this is it. Actually, this might be possible if we work together. So that was 18 months ago or so, and it's taken us a while to assemble the team.
I actually remember doing that performance. It was the opening of the Queensland Conservatorium's program for the year on the theatre stage. And I just remember you bubbling up to me afterwards going, I've got this great idea. We've got to build a big guitar. And I couldn't quite make the leap from what I had just been presenting, which was this beautiful immersive soundscape, to what a big guitar was. But I'm the sort of person that nods and says, yeah, that's a great idea. Sure, let's have a coffee. And then very, very quickly, we realized that it was sort of on the scale of very specialized buildings like the piano mill, which I've been involved in, and which Wolfe was the architect. So it made a lot of sense to bring in his expertise as one of the most musical architects I know, just to sort of get him to see if he thought it was a good idea. And then, of course, you reached out to the School of Engineering, your Luthier, if you want to go through the people that are involved in this whole project.
Yeah, so, well, then we found that in the School of Engineering, we actually have Dr. Hassan Karampur, who is a specialist in the structural qualities of wood and using very light materials to make very strong structures out of wood, which is exactly, of course, what we're looking for if we're building a giant guitar. And then Jim Redgate, who is one of the great luminaries of guitar building in the world today. He's an incredible innovator, actually, in guitar building. And I cautiously rang him thinking, he might think this is really strange. And he was like, you know what? I've always wanted to be inside a guitar. So that was lovely. And so I think we're very lucky to have an amazing team. Also with Jocelyn Wolfe, who's done some incredible research for us into other similar projects, and I guess we see this now as a kind of continuation of developing a really intimate venue that presents people with an essentially immersive sound experience.
So I'm just trying to paint a picture for people that haven't seen this, and we might be able to show some photos of this. But so someone walks along, and what do they see from the outside, and then what happens when they go inside?
Well, they see essentially a giant guitar, and I should say we're modelling this on a traditional acoustic guitar. So the whole thing is acoustic. I might just throw that in and explain that on the side. There are no electronic components apart from lighting, which contribute in any way to the sound. So the whole thing is acoustic, and it's made essentially the way a guitar is made, and it's just scaled up, I believe, by 12 and a half times, something like that, and scaled up based on an exact model of Jim Bredke's current model of classical guitars. So basically people will see a guitar on a slight angle with a shortened neck. So that's the part that we had to compromise on. Otherwise we would have had a 300-meter long neck, which would have been more like a runway than an instrument. But the part of the guitar that makes the sound, which is the resonating body, that's really what we've recreated. So you see a very large guitar. There's a way in, and then basically you find yourself inside the guitar, which becomes like a beautiful, actually very aesthetically pleasing curved room, obviously, with a large hole in the ceiling, which is the sound hole, and the strings strung across that. So we see the strings from underneath. And the reason it's on an angle is so that you can see it visually from the side, and also to allow just a little bit more height. So then people can walk around and then be seated around the belly, if you like, of the guitar, the inner belly, and the performer stands under the sound hole and essentially reaches up and plays the strings. And the other thing that a lot of people perhaps don't realise about a guitar is that the guitar really doubles as a percussion instrument. So traditionally, if we think of, for instance, Spanish flamenco music, that's quite obvious. The guitar is used, in a very percussive way in the strumming and all the different ways that the guitar is hit as for percussive effect. But in fact, percussive effects are littered throughout our repertoire. So if we are upscaling a guitar, obviously we're upscaling its percussive potential. And that's where you come in, Vanessa, because it would just be a travesty not to let people hear that. And I think, hearing all the different sounds that can be made by by the different structures and the different shapes and also types of wood that are being used. It will be such an important part of the sound and the musical experience.
I think that's what I'm really excited about. And just to let people know, this hasn't yet been built. It's in the process of getting to that stage. But the idea of having basically a new instrument constructed. It's based on an instrument we know. It's based on the guitar. It has many properties of the guitar. It's based on a guitar with resonating surfaces, so it's got the properties of a percussion instrument. But we don't quite know how it's going to actually function. We imagine that one could sort of lean against the wall and feel the vibrations of the guitar in action. We imagine that all these different surfaces will have different sounds, and the quality of woods, maybe we can talk about in a second, becomes really, really important in that. But as the composer of this initial project, I'm absolutely delighted and completely petrified about what this is, because it's a brand new thing, and it's staying in the imagination right now as far as how it will actually feel inside that and how it will be. But once it gets actually constructed, it's going to be a wonderland of creativity, I reckon, for both you learning how to play this insane instrument, because you'll be playing it from underneath, if I'm not mistaken, and then for me, both playing the sides of it and also coming up with some, musical ideas, including tunings of the strings that make sense to actually really celebrate this instrument come acoustic space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it is, of course, it is exactly as you say. It will be an entirely new instrument that takes inspiration from a normal size guitar, and takes inspiration, I think, in some ways also from percussion instruments, particularly cajon. So I think that there will be, just unexpected and hopefully delightful surprises once it's built. And I would like to think also that people will be able to walk around and explore the sounds that they themselves can make by lightly tapping the instrument in different places. So I'd like to think that, of course, there is a performative element, but I'd like to think that it's also very, tactile and experiential for people.
The other part that's really amazing about this particular project is that from the beginning, you mentioned it needs to be acoustic, and that's a really important part, but it's also mobile, it's transportable. It's not a static building that we're creating here. We're creating something that can be placed in the forecourt of something, that can be placed in a country town, that can be placed in the bush, that can be placed wherever, as long as it can be constructed and there's enough space, obviously. But I'm really excited by the fact that it's a mobile concert hall or a mobile performance space. It's an installation and it's an instrument. It's kind of got these multi-prongs, which just make it, truly unique, as we found out through the history of looking at other spaces and other instruments. And this is part of the research adventure. Is there's so much innovation going on to try and get to the end point.
I think it's also just worth touching a little bit more on Jim Bredke, who I've already said is an incredible luthier and an incredible innovator in the space of guitar making in the 21st century. And I think he's really taken this a project on as a challenge to think about, how can we make this the best musical instrument it can possibly be at this size. And he's come up with some really wonderful ideas. And I know he's been at home rigging up strings across his veranda banisters and all kinds of things to test things and to come up with the best possible sound and musical outcome. So it's been, we're incredibly lucky to work with such a great team.
Yeah. I think because it's completely unknown territory, that everyone has just boldly gone into this as we don't know what the outcome's going to be. We don't know how it's going to work. We just have to experiment. We have to be flexible. We have to be adaptable. And the goodwill that's gone into this is, it's one of my favorite projects because everyone is just willing to try stuff beyond what they know already. Yeah. And that's a really, really rare thing.
Another thing, Vanessa, that I think we should mention or, talk about is actually the amazing contribution that Bruce Wolfe has made to the architecture, because this really, it's a building. Well, it's technically a canopy, but, to most people it looks like a building. And I just wondered if you were able to just talk a little bit about your past experiences in working with Bruce, and also maybe in what you think he has brought to this project, because I think his contribution's been incredible.
Yeah. Look, Bruce Wolfe is a internationally award-winning architect. He won the World Architecture Award in the cultural category for the piano mill, which is a really innovative, again, instrument in the bush of 16 pianos in a tower. Which you listen to from the outside. So different from this immersive guitar, it's you're observing these 16 pianos in their natural state, so detuned, and it's a sounding and celebration of the history of pianos really in Australia. So it wasn't hard to think that he's probably the right person to be involved in thinking through some of the problems of the immersive guitar, but also because his aesthetic sensibility is very pragmatic, but also wanting to celebrate this idea of sound making. He's a very natural and sympathetic sound maker, and so immediately he got the idea. He understood both the transportability, but also the importance of resonance and the importance of the aesthetics of the space and the sensation of the inside of the guitar. So I think it's really rare to find an architect that can bring all those things to bear, and also someone of that caliber who's got the experience to, cope with the sometimes differing needs of other disciplines, like the engineering needs and the guitar builders' needs, etc. So it's actually been very, very interesting watching the slowed down working process. I see Bruce's sort of fast-paced outcomes, but actually being inside the process has been really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And then that married with the very, very organised methodology of Jocelyn Wolfe, who's gone about actually researching the history of other guitar projects and also other instrument building projects from around Australia and around the world, and has come up with some really, really remarkable information, which will be published in an article. Do you just want to talk about the innovation that's going on, hopefully, in the area of wood and what our dream is on the wood front?
Yeah, so I mean, look, it's been a bit of a I guess a sore point of guitarists and luthiers, that guitars traditionally have used some fairly, let's say, I'm looking for the right word, but timbers that are not considered to be terribly ideally ethical or sustainable. Sustainable is a better word. And because we're doing all of this in Queensland, we discovered that we actually have some incredible innovation in Queensland through the Queensland government, actually encouraging growers to explore sustainable Queensland timbers, which have all the properties that we need, particularly the strength and the lightness, and the combination of those two factors. So, and that's where we've been lucky, because we've worked with Hassan Karampour, our engineering colleague, who was able to kind of show us that actually it would be possible to build this instrument out of entirely sustainable Queensland local timbers. So that's something for me personally that is really exciting. And I think the timbers, just from the little samples that we've seen, actually look spectacularly beautiful. And I think, for this experience to really fulfill our expectations, we also want it to be visually beautiful. So I think that's something, that's another box, another sort of dream box that we've managed to hopefully tick. So that's that. And I guess another thing that might be kind of interesting to talk about is also just some of the challenges that come from upsizing. One of those is, of course, the strings. Not only the material of the strings, which will influence very much its playability and, of course, its pitch. If the strings are too thick, the pitch will be very low, possibly even below the audible spectrum, which we obviously don't want. If the strings are too thin, they'll be so tight that they exert so much pressure on the building, so much tension on the building, that it's also not sustainable. So that's been a bit of an interesting journey. And then also the tuning mechanism. How do we tune? We won't have obviously a standard a tuning head the way you would on a guitar. So we've looked at various different ways of tuning, and we seem to have resolved that very well now. And also not having a fretboard. How do we change the pitch apart from just changing between the strings? But where we're at the moment is, I believe the whole thing will sound an octave down from a normal guitar, which is in the range of what we would call a contrabass guitar. So it's a very beautiful, very mellow sound, and obviously in that lower register, which I think is actually really appropriate for the size of the instrument. It would be quite strange if the instrument sounded at pitch or, God forbid, even higher. So I'm really excited that that's been resolved, because for a while that was quite a stressful process, trying different materials, and the material we found is actually very also playable for me. Like it still feels like a guitar string.
It's been a really interesting project for me, being in such an interdisciplinary team. So the expertise of everyone are undoubtedly at a really high level. And everyone is particularly interested in guitars. I've learned a lot about how interested so many of, our colleagues are in the guitar. But the difficulty is working out how to marry the needs of each discipline, and the aesthetic needs as well as the practical needs, which includes, the composer, the guitarist, the luthier, the architect, the engineer, the researcher. Everyone's got these different points of view. And so I've actually really, really enjoyed the conversations, the email exchanges about things I know nothing about, and just seeing how that changes my thinking or affects my thinking, and really trying to work out what I want to hold on to and what I'm willing to let go of. And I think for each of us, it's been a tension, but also, the pun of the tension of the strings, a tension, and also a really interesting learning process. The very first time we got together, we set up the model of the guitar just out of material, microphone stands, chairs, just to try and sort of explain things to each other. We built tiny little sound boxes and had the material of the strings stretching out, and just really learning how each other thinks, which is what I think really an interdisciplinary project can bring to the table, is like sharing methodologies and sharing approaches to a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me, a big learning curve has been how some of the obvious and, to be expected problems have been resolved, and how everyone, initially we all sort of identify the problem, but then we all spoke a slightly different language in trying to resolve the problem. And there was a few misunderstandings and a few tangents along the way that people went on. And I think, it's the sort of the practical versus the aesthetic versus the artistic, exactly as you said, versus the just purely structural. And exactly as you said, bringing all of that together is not without its challenges. And I think when you work together with people from such different disciplines, you do realize that people think very, very differently, and obviously prioritize very differently. But that is the joy of it. And that's and I think that's how something really new can emerge, when people put their heads together from different disciplines and have the courage to bring their own opinions, and more, and even more than that, their own sort of demands to the table, because I said from the beginning, because initially people said, well, it's going to be really low. And I said, it can't be really low. It just can't. It has to be, in this kind of pitch range and things like that. So it's been a really great, interesting process.
So I know in these COVID days, it's on a little bit of a hiatus while we await the possible future of this project. But it's been really awesome chatting about this today. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Vanessa.